Buddy, Sam and Nick Willis. We're going to have a conversation about running and longevity in running. Nick is a two-time Olympic medalist, 2008 silver medalist in Beijing, the 1500, and then also bronze medalist in Rio. He has an all-time PR of 3:49.83 in the mile, which is kind of his specialty. Most amazingly, just recently in January, he continued his streak of sub 4 minute miles with another great race. And he broke four for the 19th year in a row with a 3:58.63, just nudging ahead of his legendary fellow Kiwi, Sir John Walker. So an amazing streak of longevity. In terms of running. So that's of great interest to all of our viewers. So I found an article on Tracksmith's journal, and Nick is now working with Tracksmith as the athlete experience manager as of 2020. He turned a professional runner at 22, and he became an amateur at 37. And I'm going to quote him here from the article that he wrote. The freedom of amateurism opens up a plethora of options in the running sphere that I've always been curious about. I'd love to join my cousin on some backcountry FKTs. I'd love to do some master sprint races. The 200 has always been a favorite of mine. I'd love to do some multi-day relay races. And yes, perhaps a marathon or three. So welcome, Nick, to Road Trail Run and our video here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Having you read that last quote, that got me really excited because since then I've actually still been sort of chugging along and doing the whole running the mile on the track thing. And but now suddenly talking about doing some FKTs with my cousin or doing the Masters 200 meters, that gets me excited again. I'm enjoying what I'm doing now, but that is what I'm really excited to explore, those different avenues of running, which have sort of been outside of my narrow scope of focus the last 20 years or so.
So when you say FKTs, what are you thinking there? We have a lot of trail runners here at Road Trail Run, and
my cousin is a mountain climber first, but of course we have similar genes, so he's got the running ability as well. And his thing is normally to get to the top of peaks in New Zealand and the mountain ranges there. But he's done some ones where it's like a point to point over rough terrain, which very few people have ever run across. It's normally like multi-day hikes where there's no allocated trail. You sort of, we call it bush bashing, where you hack through the scrub and all of that sort of stuff. And then you get picked up by a helicopter at the other end. And there's that sort of stuff, as he explains it to me, that sounds really, really intriguing. Adventurous, I suppose. Stuff that I can develop stories to tell my kids when I'm older.
so the consistency to achieve so many wonderful performances over so many 2 decades plus, because I read you ran a 401 mile when you were even in high school. So I'm curious as to where and how you started. What, as a young runner, when you first started, what motivated you to get going? Was it kind of an easy transition? What were you like as a kid?
Yeah, there's sort of two parts to when I started running. The first is that I was born into a family which was already involved in the track and field community. My dad was the local announcer at the track meets, and my older brother and older sister were kids attending what I like to call these picnic athletics meetings. Basically, all the families set up their picnic set up next to the grass track. All of the tracks where I was from were grass. And then the kids would do the 100 meters, the shot put, the high jump, the long jump. It'd be sort of a 4-hour occasion. It was a wonderful experience. So when I was finally old enough that I was allowed to take part in those events, you better believe I wanted to take part, So that was a lot of fun. And of course, running was my specialty, but I enjoyed all elements of track and field. And it was a great way to make friends and to just be competing all the time. But I never started training until I was about 15 years of age. I think the first time I went for a run, like not doing a race or a competition, but actually just going for a run, as we like to think of it in the general sense of what being a runner is, I probably wasn't until I was about 15 or 16. It was all just being a sprinter or a more technical elements of competing before that.
And I'll just have to tell you that we have sort of a similar origins in running, but mine was enforced by my prep school. We had to take a test of all the different disciplines, all the things you mentioned. And it turned out that about all I enjoyed doing was running, or could do. So that's where and we had to do sports. So I gravitated towards running early, but a similar kind of origin. That's really neat. So a key question for me, what motivated you to continue this amazing 19-year streak of sub 4-minute miles? And how did it all when did you realize you were kind of on a streak, so to speak? People often streak days of running, but please tell us a bit about that.
I guess let's be honest, first and foremost, it's sort of an obscure way that the record, I'll put in quotation marks, is sort of categorized. It's in a calendar year, not necessarily by, not by your age or whatever. But I never thought about it until I was apparently at 17 years in succession. Basically, it was my job to be a runner and it was my passion. I wanted to be the best runner in the world. And so it was natural that if or when I got injured, and there were many times I had 4 surgeries, 5 stress fractures, and countless other setbacks. It was always about getting back ready so that I could race my main distances, and that was the 1500 and the mile. And it just so happened that I was able to keep that streak alive each year. I might get injured for an indoor season, but still have an outdoor season. Or if I was healthy in the indoor season, I might have been injured for the outdoor, but there were enough opportunities there. But in the last 2 years, when I started thinking about what do I want to do with the rest of my life, do I want to keep running? And it definitely, the streak concept was something that has kept me in the game and excited and has me something to aim for. I'm not always at the front of races anymore. I'll be honest and frank about that. So before, my motivation was to try and win or be as competitive as possible. And that isn't always possible anymore. I'm not the same athlete as I once was, but having this sub 4 streak sort of gives me reason to still celebrate, even if I'm at the back of the pack.
So that's really cool and interesting, because often I think runners set a goal from their or a achievement from their youth and try to at all costs win or hit the time that they did decades ago. But we all have to adapt. For me, it's try to hold on, and I'm going to be 64, to hold on to a sub 140 half. And so I think it's wise for runners to adapt as they age, although you haven't had to adapt too much.
No, but you're right. Like, that is one of the big reasons why I was battling with this. Every time I'd finish a race for the several years, I was like, man, I just want to quit. I can't do it. I'm not the same athlete I was before. And it wasn't until I let go of that I could re-enjoy it again. And so that's, I think, what's helped me cross that bridge that I was struggling with maybe in the last 2 years. And now I'm really excited again, because I've come to that realization and accepted that there is, you can move the goalposts, so to speak, and still derive a lot of enjoyment about reaching challenges and marks, not relative to the past, but what you're trying to aim for in your current situation.
Yeah, and how is that adapted to, how have you adapted your training over the years? And are you training different? Did you train differently? Of course, we had the pandemic in 2020 than in the past.
Well, again, that's something that was probably a cause of some of my many frustrations the last 2 years. I keep going back to this. I wasn't very happy with my running the last 2 years. I wasn't enjoying it, and I felt very forced. And it wasn't until the COVID period when I didn't have to race, where I got to actually see what did I like about running, that I really enjoyed the social element of it, the camaraderie, but I also enjoyed being able to space my workouts out a bit more, because I wasn't under the pressure to get into fitness for any races right away. And so I finally have made the adjustment or an adaptation that seems intuitive. Everyone has mentioned that in the past, that you can't hit it as hard as frequently when you're older. So I finally this year have made that adjustment. So now I do my workouts or the harder efforts every fifth day as opposed to every second or third day.
So about 20%, well, 20, roughly 1 in 5, so 20%.
So I don't follow a 7-day-a-week schedule anymore. I just will go, I will take 3 or 4 days rest between each hard workout. And then, so I basically do a workout, a longer run, and then 2 or 3 easier days, and then do that again.
So
And
what
so
is an easy day
my
for
cycle.
you in terms of mileage and pace?
My mileage can still be fairly high. It depends based on what I've got going on. If I'm going skiing with my family or playing with my kids, but it could be upwards of 12 miles. But basically, no faster than sort of a 6:40 or 7-minute mile pace.
Oh, I think that's a really good way to train. I pretty much try to do that. Only once every 5 days do I really push it hard. Now back to those 19 years in races. What was the toughest year to reach the goal, and why? And what did you do, and how did you make it that year?
Looking back, because I wasn't trying to do it until recently, but looking back, there was one year where I'd had a bunch of injuries and things weren't clicking. And I was fortunate that I did it on my very last possible race that would have been available that season, and that was at the Long Island Mile. And I only did the race because it was in memory of David Torrance, a close friend who passed away several years ago. Any of you who are familiar, he was one of America's top milers. So I entered that race because it was only a week or so after David had passed away. And so I was able to break 4 that day. And in hindsight, had I not done that race, that streak wouldn't have kept alive. So it's often about having the opportunities to race a mile and to have it where it is fast enough, I suppose.
I think 2020 was a remarkable year, really, for performances, really across the whole spectrum of events, track and field, marathon. And I think that the not having a fixed schedule, but more a schedule when people were ready or when conditions were ideal was a big part of it. It was pretty amazing what people did, even solo or near solo. It's kind of a different way of thinking about performance, I think.
Yeah, and if you go back in history, the World Championships put on by World Athletics, or the IAAF as we used to know it, they only started back in 1983. Prior to that, there was no such thing as a World Championships. And even in 1983, they were only every 4 years. So there used to be more seasons that had no championships where the athletes could just focus on racing for time. So that was a little bit more like what last year was like. And half of us, myself included, chose not to bother racing. It was sort of nice to have a break because every year you've been on mentally. It was nice to just have that break mentally from having to do all of the travel. And I've been going to Europe 2 or 3 times a year for the last 16 years. So it was nice to actually enjoy a summer at home and all of the things that are available around Michigan rather than always be working in the summer, I suppose.
And so as a result, how did your training in year go? Obviously, you know, in 2021 early, you got under that bar again. So how did it all proceed for you?
Yeah, training was pretty good. As I said, I've really enjoyed the social outlet of running, and especially at the peak of the pandemic and all of the lockdowns, exercise was one of the few things one could do. And we all saw that if you looked out on your street, like there were a lot more people out exercising than would normally be. And so it turned out that when we would rendezvous for workouts several times a week, our group started growing and growing and growing. There might only be 4 or 5 of us who were actually doing the workouts, but there might be 15 or 20 people that would come along to hang out just to be a part of that group of people, because you can't go to restaurants, you can't go to bars, you can't go to movie theaters. This was the one sort of social outlet in a safe social distancing way in an outdoor environment. So that was a real joy. We would do it late in the evenings because it was so hot in the Michigan summer. And yeah, it was one of my more enjoyable running experiences was this summer, not worrying about racing, but just showing up to the different hill or tempo or track workouts just to hang out with people that were near and dear to us. It was a very special time given the circumstances.
Very, very, yeah, very true. And I've just been amazed, even here in New Hampshire on the seacoast, dead of winter, how many people are out and about, be it walking, running, uh, at the beach. It's changed patterns, I think, by not having those all those indoor kind of entertainment outlets.
Yeah, I
So
think there's
go ahead.
two main elements to it. The way I have analyzed it is it's you don't have the indoor opportunities, but also when people are working remotely, they have the more time on their hands where they can actually go and exercise. Whereas normally, if you have to commute an hour to work each way, you're too exhausted to then also then chuck on your shoes afterwards. But this is a nice way to have a break during your workday, and people will be exercising at 10:30 in the morning or 2:30 in the afternoon, when normally no one is around the neighborhoods at that time of the day.
Yeah, so much wasted time commuting, going to offices, et cetera. Big changes, I think, in patterns. Now, 2021, we talked a bit about maybe FKT. You mentioned in the article marathon. Are you going to try for another 4 minute mile?
Yeah, I've got one actually coming up this coming weekend.
Oh no!
In Fayetteville, Arkansas. So if I don't break four, I'll probably come last in the race. So I have to keep going. Yeah, this whole 2021 season is all gearing up towards trying to secure selection for the New Zealand Olympic team in
Oh,
Tokyo.
great.
And so it'll be relatively sort of normal processes for me. You have an indoor season, get back to base training, and have an outdoor season starting in May, running a bunch of miles in 1500s. And then after the Tokyo Olympic selection, if I make the team, I'll keep training hard through to August for those. And if I don't, then I'll reevaluate and decide what could be some other interesting challenges. But I am enjoying running. I don't want to stop it. It might look slightly different in one of those other interesting areas, and we'll just have to wait and see. But I think at 19 years successive miles under four, I think it'd be silly not to go for number 20. It's a nice round number. So I'm
Absolutely.
sure next indoor season, if there is one, I'll try and keep going for that.
And it's if you make it to Park City, as you mentioned, you might in April. There are two indoor tracks, but they're pretty tight turns.
Well,
One
and you're up at elevation as well, so
it was 7 laps, 7.5 laps the mile, and then there's another one that's about 9. So I'm not sure they're suitable for speed work. One of them is, but I'll give you tips if you make it there and you want to.
well, in Salt Lake City, there's actually one that's 500 meters or over 400 meters. It's around a big hockey rink.
Oh, I've been on that. Yes, that and it's a Mondo Track. Have you run on that one?
Um,
It's pretty amazing. They have a 4 hour race there, New Year's Day. It's firm, it's fast, and it's just gigantic. You got to watch out for the walkers, though. There are a lot of
I've never actually been to Utah, but maybe we'll get a chance to. We'll see.
excellent. Um, Now let's talk a bit about Tracksmith. So you're the athlete experience manager. What does that entail? And tell us a bit about the brand and why you joined. We love Tracksmith at Road Trail Run. We have one of our key contributors, Jost, is in Angola, Africa, and he swears by the Reggie tight. I'm actually wearing the NDO Jacket, which has proved fantastic here the last week when we finally got winter.
Yeah, no, it's been a real joy, and I feel very privileged to have landed this job, especially right as the pandemic sort of started getting going. And it's been a real nice shift of focus where before I was just spending every minute that I wasn't training trying to wait for my next workout, and like it's easy for your mind to get consumed with your sport being your focus all the time. So this is it's a really healthy distraction, but B, I've been yearning for several years now to try and advance my skill set and knowledge in other areas. I have an economics degree from the University of Michigan, which I haven't really exercised any of that side of my skill set for many years. So I feel like I'm a kid entering the real world for the first time, but I'm 37, right? I'm terribly sorry. I should have turned the sound off my
No
phone.
problem.
Yeah, so first and foremost, it's fun to be learning from a ton of really passionate but very skilled people. And that's, I guess, the area that I've been most interested by this corporate experience. not that I would really call us a corporation, is that there's people with very specialized areas of skill. And so a lot of those areas are ones that I am severely lacking in. So I feel like it's really helped me learn a ton. And so that's been really fun. I thought I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but if I ever did want to go that route, this definitely has taught me so much that I wouldn't have known otherwise. So that if I would have put some of this knowledge into a future endeavor, then that would be incredibly wise. As an athlete experience manager, I'm part of the community team, which is under the marketing branch. So basically, my role is to come alongside all of our athletes. And that involves both the elite, the core customers, who are the people that go to races. It doesn't matter their ability, but they take running very, very seriously, and they own running as their identity, and come alongside and enhance that experience. And so at the moment, it's been a little challenging from an events perspective, because in-person stuff, we can't put on workouts or sort of get-togethers in person, but we've created some fun virtual experiences, and I host sort of a weekly intimate conversation on Zoom, where I invite all of our core customers, part of our Here AC Athletic Club, as you see in my shirt. Come along, and I interview guests just like you're interviewing me right now, but it gives the athletes a chance to ask the questions as well. But I also help manage our amateur support program, which is our elite branch of our athletes. And these are athletes who are getting ready for the Olympic trials. And so it's been really fun sort of scouting, recruiting, and helping assist them in whatever ways. But I also have a real passion for events, and I think that's an area where I can really contribute to the sport. And so there's a balance between adding to the calendar that already exists versus also finding events that are on the calendar and helping them become better and better. So there's been a lot of brainstorming and planning in the works. The main thing that I've learned at Tracksmith is to do a few things really, really well. Don't try and do everything. And so taking a lot of time and picking our moments to really make an impact in the sport. And our goal is to make people fall more and more in love with running. And I would say it's hard for someone to have a greater love of running than I have. So hopefully I can sort of share that with other people so they can share some of those joys as well.
It's a marvelous brand, and the visuals and the words that associate, the visuals being both of course the gear, but also the tempo journal, I'm sorry, the meter, and reflect an aesthetic that's very much about the depth and joy of running, and also reflects New England, where I'm from, well, and increasingly well. I've really been excited about the off-roads collection. The crew, off-roads crew was my favorite apparel piece of 2020. Superman, I'm kind of an apparel nut, and I'm really enjoying the NDO jacket. So I'm glad, as sort of a gear geek, that Tracksmith is branching out into yet more functional gear, which is really cool.
Yeah, I wear the off-road jacket nearly every single day. It doesn't feel very thick, so you think, oh, how could you wear this in winter? But I've actually used it when I've been snowboarding in Flagstaff, because it gets so hot up there. You don't want to have a thick winter jacket on when you're skiing, and then you can pack it away as well. No, it's been a lot of fun, and I've dabbled in some of the different areas, but I'm still excited myself to try out a lot of the new stuff that we've got coming out soon. So that's really exciting once that gets launched.
Cool. Now, as this is Road Trail Run, and we're very much focused on running shoes, let's end with a little discussion about what you've run in the past, what shoes you train in, some of your all-time favorites, be it spikes or trainers.
Well, I sort of did one, what do they call it in the current vernacular? Like, I did a little flex. I wasn't intending to, but I was joking with my training partners the other day that I've never bought a pair of running shoes in my life. Because when I was in high school, my brother, who's 8 years older than me, he was sponsored by Adidas. So I would get all of his hand-me-downs. And then when I got good enough, I started getting some free gear from Nike and Adidas. And then I went to college and then our school was sponsored by Nike, and then I turned pro with Reebok for 8 years,
Oh,
and
really?
then I then transitioned into Adidas for the next 7 years. So I haven't tried a whole bunch of different brands, but recently I've had a chance to give a pair of Hokas a go, a couple of New Balance, but I still think my favorite training shoes are the Boosts from Adidas, like the different range, and the Bostons are probably my all-time favorite shoe because they're such a versatile shoe. When you're traveling, especially, you need a shoe that can last for a long run and you can do a workout in them.
I,
Um,
I
and
was
so
a
I
huge
think
fan.
Boston is probably my all-time favorite shoe.
I was a huge fan of the first three, I'll say, Boost shoes. The Energy Boost, one of my all-time favorites. The Adios Boost, the first version, and the Boston Boost. So I'm with you on that. But it's great you get to experiment with a few others. There's so many out there.
Yeah, hey, if someone wants to send me a pair, I'll try them out. But yeah, I've still got like hundreds of pairs stored in my basement from all of the years of being sponsored. So I'm pretty well taken care of, thankfully.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have that freedom. And as you might have mentioned earlier, not running professionally anymore has given me the freedom where I can pick and choose what I want to do, when I want to do it, and how I do it as well. And I know that sounds pretty cliche, but it's nice to know that I'm choosing to run now. I always did choose, but you weren't quite sure if it was a choice at times. There was like a compulsion or a necessity for you to, because that was your identity. That other people, when people say, "What do you do?" that's like the first question someone asks you if you're sitting next to them on the airplane or at the bar or whatever. Well, I'm a professional runner, so you gotta. If you're not running, then you're unemployed, right? But now that I have a career outside of my athletic ambitions, running is a choice, and it's helped me refine the love for it. It's something I do as a way to relieve stress and to have social interaction. And I think the biggest thing for me, that I really struggle with if I don't run, is having that bonding time with close friends. As a middle-aged guy, like, maybe I'm middle-aged or not.
Oh, you're not. No, you're not. I'm.
Well, whatever. Once guys after their ages of 30s, there's lots of literature out there and articles written about we men often get isolated and we don't have those same networks of friends, and there can be depression developing from all that. And I find that running is a really healthy outlet for me to have some close bonding time with close friends where you sort of talk about stuff deeper than just superficial on the surface level stuff. And so running is that outlet for me, and that's what I miss the most when I'm injured or am away and I can't do that.
It's interesting because it's absolutely true. I personally have run with very few people this year. Usually run alone most of the time, but I very much enjoy my Park City running friends. But what's been interesting is our Road Trail Run contributors group. We have a private Facebook group, and it's really, I think, and most of our contributors really love the race. You know, Jost, I mentioned, won both New York and Berlin in his men's 50 age group, and there's Sally, who was second in New York City Marathon. It's served as a community, and you know, we talk a lot about the running shoes, but as a community that's virtual, with all the contributors sort of, you know, they're all passionate, and they're so. But I very much miss running with people, and you know, I can't wait for the first live race, probably in April for me, a half. So, but it's
What's that? Which race is that you're hoping to do?
well, it's one I traditionally do. That's usually, I think, in March or February, but they're doing it April. It's a half marathon here in New Hampshire along the seacoast, Pancake Flat, and so it'll be April this year.
Cool.
So we'll see. And then the same race company has another one that's usually in April. They're also having in April that's quite a bit hillier. Half is my thing these days. I don't have the kind of the discipline or the energy, if you will, or the willingness to chance injury to train much for marathons. Although, you know, I've done Boston a bunch of times. So
I'm always curious talking to people who do road races. You race at 7:30, 8 in the morning. Often it can be really cold before the start line. What's your clothing strategy? Because so many times you see people overdressed or underdressed on the start line. How do you manage that balance?
If I was going to line up, if I was going to line up in the mid-20s, let's say, if in mid-20s for a race, and that's cold, relatively cold, I would go with probably your Reggie tights, half tights, and the crew. And that's it. The
Do you
off-road.
stand on the start line for 30 minutes before the race just in those
Well,
clothes, or do you?
usually, what if it's cold and windy, what I do, and a lot of people do, is get a nice big old garbage bag, cut a hole and put it over my head. And then of course, start a bit slower, but that I always kind of go like a bat out of hell. But I've run many of these halves in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and you shiver a bit and then you go and you warm up quickly. You definitely don't want to overdress. Um, so it's sometimes challenging.
You don't go to the Salvation Army and buy a bunch of old sweats that you can
Oh,
chuck
for
off.
Boston, for sure. Oh, for Boston, always, all kinds of stuff. The amount of clothing that's left and donated is phenomenal on a cold day. But yeah, that's another way, but what I find is I warm up quite quickly. But so it's, but the gear, the Tracksmith gear, the kind of the classics, the Van Cortlandt tee shorts, maybe not so much when it's cold, but some of the newer stuff, the off-roads and the Reggie, would be great.
Maybe I'll talk to our tech people at Tracksmith that we can develop an app that all you have to do is plug in your location, which draws the weather of that moment, and it will tell you exactly the right combination of clothing that you should wear.
I would be happy to help contribute to that. But I, as I said, like at the beginning or earlier, I am really liking the NDO jacket. And if it's cold, like, teens, I just put the crew underneath. Remarkable breathability, just a little bit of warmth from the merino fuzz on the inside, very windproof. To be honest with you, I prefer it over the off-roads jacket, which is a bit loose and baggy. This in the cold really creates a nice air gap,
NDO has a really interesting pocket combination on the right pocket, so you don't have to undo the zips to get your hands in to be warm, but there is a zip compartment in the back to get your stuff into.
Oh yeah, remarkable. The zip pocket, I put, and because of the kind of the weight of it and the kind of drape, and in my review I said so, I just put my phone, because I'm always taking pictures, in the front pocket. But then I found 1, 2, 3, 4 pockets on the inside, which is really cool. That equally, there's the drop-ins, there's a kind of a phone pocket, there's a chest one up here. It's a pricey piece, but if you're in a place where winter running is and shoulder seasons, it's a great one.
Sorry, I had a work email just come through, a Slack message I had to respond to. That's part of the talk.
Nick, it's been an honor and a pleasure to spend some time with you, and we're looking forward to seeing you in 2021, trying for an FKT, a road race, and another sub 4-minute mile. So wish you all the best. Stay well, and thank you very much for joining Road Trail Run.
All right, guys, take care, everybody. Enjoy your training.